one of the reasons I came here is I wasn't necessarily under the illusion that the grass would be greener on this side, but I figured there's going to be a hell of a lot more grass because this company is really big into SmallCell. The guy that founded our company, Sun Li-Xing, was one of the top 12 guys at Huawei, what they call one of the 12 fellows. And he believes that LTE and SmallCell is the vehicle that will finally allow IT to eat telecom. So he left Huawei 1 year before full retirement. He left at 44 years old. If he had stayed 1 year more, he had got over $1 million US a year for the rest of his life, and he walked away from that to start his own company because his vision is so big, wrapped up around here. And one of the things he did, the main thing he did at Huawei, he built their IPR portfolio for LTE. And he's kind of revered and overseas for that reason. A lot of the guys from Huawei left and came to join him. But we're all carrying around some of his patents in our pockets or our purses. So why we here in North America are focused really on, you know, the on the ground revenue with rural broadband, they've been working feverishly on SmallCell. And our worlds intersect in CBRS. Because one of the challenges in SmallCell in North America is that in the license bands, the carriers own them, and you can't do anything without their approval. You can't go deploy a SmallCell in building using 1.9, because that's someone else's spectrum. CBRS changes that. That reality isn't true in many parts of the world. In other parts of the world, you can actually sell products in other bands, depending on power or whatever. But here in the US, CBRS will allow small cells to come into North America. Why does that matter? I'm going to give you a lot of reasons, but the very simplest reason is that there are a hell of a lot more things than there are people. Anything that can benefit from intelligence needs to be connected. Amber alert signs, parking meters, cameras, everything has got to be connected. And the only efficient way to do that sort of stuff, and that's static things that don't move, much less things that move. Only way you can connect things that move are wireless. But even then, static things, unless you want to build out infrastructure and power and all this other sort of stuff, wireless is your best route. So we've got about 250 employees total, only 10 of them are in the US. We have over 350 patents and patents pending. Most of them revolve around the LTE ecosystem, quite a bit related to SmallCell. It's actually an astonishing patent portfolio for a company our age and our size. And when he built that IPR portfolio, one of the things that was his responsibility is that he was chairman of a lot of the Pan-Asian standards bodies within ITU and 3GPP and these other groups that are developing LTE standards. So he got to know everyone in the scientific side of the community. That's why we're doing all these interesting things with Facebook and have a very close strategic relationship with Intel, with Qualcomm, and a number of other household names for some of the stuff they're doing on the BD front. And I'm really excited about SmallCell for WISPs, because most of you don't know a whole heck of a lot about it, but I can see this in my head. I've seen it in my head for years. You are best positioned to take a bite off this apple, better than anyone else in the US, because you already understand wireless, you're getting to understand LTE, you have the relationships in your communities, whether it's with future potential private network operators, whether that's utilities, whether that's your cities, your water authorities, or whoever it is. So you will be doing things in SmallCell whether you realize it or not. You will be making bank with some of this stuff, some of you guys that are more creative in thinking about this. And under CBRS, one of the things we didn't really talk about is there's there's several levels. There's what they call Category A devices and Category B devices. Category A devices are basically the easiest way to think about them. They're lower power, mostly indoor devices. Why does that matter? Hospitals with their HIPAA issues. Banks doing secure transactional stuff. So let me ask you a question. Why do any of these people use Wi-Fi today? It's a question. Who wants to answer it? It's the only thing available for them, right? Unless they want to buy spectrum. You're a private network operator or a healthcare system, you're not going to go pay billions of dollars for spectrum. So they got to use Wi-Fi or something in ISM or whatever. And then they got to bolt on all this security stuff on top of it. In comes CBRS under Category A. Guess what? You might as well call that LTE Wi-Fi. These technologies, because they're inherently more secure than Wi-Fi, because you can do QRS, it's going to take over a lot of what Wi-Fi does, even in the enterprise. Well, Wi-Fi will be pushed out more for best effort sort of stuff, guest use, but for internal enterprise use, you're going to see a lot of small cell in CBRS taking over that space. Additionally, because that can ultimately connect to the cellular network, it's even more valuable. Ah, the segues are much more elegant if the advanced works. Okay. There we go. That went. Ah, I have to power it on. There we go. So what's a small cell? It's really pretty simple. And if Matt Hoppus was here, and he's the guy that went with me to China, you would recognize small cell immediately because it's everywhere over there. Basically, I'll read this. This is from the Small Cell Forum. It's a site I recommend you go to and learn about. It's an umbrella term for operator-controlled, low-power radio access nodes, including those that operate in licensed spectrum and unlicensed carrier-grade Wi-Fi, otherwise known as LTE-U, soon Yufei. Small cells typically have a range from just a couple meters to several hundred meters. That sounds a lot like Wi-Fi in range-wise in terms of its designed use, doesn't it? And we can all understand the graphic, but keep in mind the things, you know, these could be security cameras or whatever it is. And you can see that it's, you know, residential, enterprise, indoor, outdoor, whatever. Small cell is an umbrella term. It covers a lot of stuff, right? Everything under the size cells you put in can theoretically be called a small cell. In fact, in the carrier space, they consider a 1 watt a small cell. We consider it more than macro cell, but for them, it's a small cell. This should hit you, and I won't read this, I'll let you read it. But, you know, back in the early days of WISP stuff, we all thought more power was better. Kind of like, forget that comedian where he's always like, power's good. And we all thought, oh, you know, we'll just throw YDI amps on these things and more power, yay. But, you know, as you mature, the industry matures, you learn that actually more power can sometimes work to your detriment, and sometimes lower power is better. So if you're trying to increase capacity, you only have so much spectrum, you can layer in lower power cells, reuse that spectrum without interference risk if it's well planned to your larger cells. So it's a way you can add capacity. But if you can see there, the metric shown that you can create using small cell a capacity improvement up to 1,600 times. That's an incredible statistic. So why are they for WISPs? These are just some bullet points I put together quickly, and really this part of the program, it's not technical, but I'm trying to expand your mind and get you thinking about different things. CBRS, 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 additional revenue models. Because there's going to be millions upon millions upon millions of small cell Even the carriers don't want to build all these things out themselves. Too expensive. Think if we have a couple small cells in this building and you're AT&T and you have to build one, you have to get an agreement with the property management company. You got to bring power to that. You got to bring backhaul or whatever. So to the extent that you start building some of these technologies out in your world, for all we know, there's a chance that some of these big carriers may start working with you guys to form roaming agreements. And I was telling Gulf Coast guys outside, I would bet that within a couple of years there'll be task groups created inside Verizon and AT&T whose job will be to go around and approach WISPs, and they'll go to WISP events and try to form roaming agreements with WISPA. I think that's going to happen under this ban because they just can't build all this stuff out by themselves. Enterprise Wi-Fi replacement. Most WISP I know, because if you're in a rural area, sometimes the WISP businesses alone won't necessarily put all the food on the table to feed all your techs and everything else. So many of you guys do other sort of services. You do network services. Maybe some of you guys do cable plant, these kinds of things, right? And maybe you're managing, Wi-Fi for a local enterprise or whatever it is. This is an opportunity to go in there and tell these customers, listen, all this hassle and interference and security issues you've been dealing with for Wi-Fi, here's another way you can do that. I think, so enterprise Wi-Fi replacement. Densification. Capacity is everything. We all need bigger pipes. Yes, we need to give you tools with carrier aggregation and all these other kinds of things, but you'll still need to densify your capacity. And with SmallCell gives you that opportunity to densify by using small cells and leveraging the lower power just to put the capacity where you need it. And again, why WISPs? At this point, you have assets that you can leverage. You've already got your billing structures, you've got vertical real estate, you've got functioning ISP operations, you've got a lot of stuff in place that you need, especially for potential private network operators that might want to use PALs, CBRS PALs in your area that won't have these skill sets. And most of them are going to be too small to internally develop them. So a good chance that they can leverage your services to do that. So let's talk about some of the small cells that we have. And I won't go into a whole lot of detail on some of these things. I'll go in more about theory on some of them. But I'll walk around and show some. So this is one we've convinced them basically build. The form factor might end up being a little bit changed. Really, it's up to your distributors. If we get enough interest, the distributors will order these. They can order these now. They'll have to be built. But this is a 2 by 250 milliwatt small cell. This one is actually a built-in 90-degree antenna, PoE, whatever. I'd actually like a version with end connectors and to do a little Omni or something. What's the idea with this? Well, how many of you guys use Ubiquiti or Mimosa to do microcells, even under LTE or even under your Cambium cells? This gives you the same opportunity to do that kind of thing, drop in microcells, even mount something like this at a subscriber location without any site lease because they're small and they're not too butt ugly, so maybe some of them tolerate that. And mate that with this subscriber device, which is the indoor subscriber. We're the only ones, I think, that's certified. I think Wowie maybe just did it, a 365 indoor subscriber device. But is there anyone in here that uses these now? Okay, and share the results you're getting?
I've got an EMV on our building. One piece of my house about 200 yards, and I've got 2 others that are probably about 1,000. What's fine is the lag memory firmware release.
Yeah.
I need a lot of disconnect, reconnect, but not reboot.
Yeah.
Otherwise, occasional light.
Yeah, and some of that stuff will certainly get ironed out. There's a guy out west who puts these in RV parks, and at half a mile he gets like 30 megs up, or 30 megs down, 3 up.
We have a town who we just put up the board of our trial EMV. We have a town on about 1,200 units within probably 400 yards.
Mm-hmm.
So talk about self.
Yeah.
Excited. We like Baicells
Yeah, that's definitely going to happen. This is a small cell. This is another. This is a 2 by 120 milliwatt. This was in Qualcomm's booth. This is one of the ones that China Mobile uses for basically indoor hole filling. Nothing super fancy. This is can be FDD or TDD. The ones that are selling now are obviously FDD overseas. You can even have some of these even with an embedded EPC, actually, or they can all go back if you have a whole bunch of them. They can aggregate to what we call octonode, which is a dedicated kind of an enterprise gateway solution. This is one that's really cool. We actually don't have this guy here, and you can't see the back. But the biggest problem this is 2 by 50 milliwatt, the world's smallest small cell. It's called an ELF cell. And this is a commercial version of it, and that's another commercial version of it. This one doesn't have integrated PLC. That one does. Integrated power line connection. Because what's your biggest problem deploying small cell in building is bringing clean power to it and then bringing backhaul to it. With the PLC connection, you just solve both those problems. So guess what? For China Mobile and some others, we build this into exit signs. They're already in the right place inside the buildings. They've got the cleanest power in the building, and anywhere in the world you use the exit sign as a dedicated power run. So we can plug right into that and boop, just add water, small cell, no infrastructure required to build. All those are single band, right? So whether it's just CBRS by itself or whether it's one of the cellular bands, those are single bands. But I would love to see CBRS versions of all these guys, but we're getting to one of the ones that's really the most interesting. In June of this past year, 3GPP.org, which is the organization creating the standards for LTE, ratified a narrowband LTE spec. So tiny, tiny channels to connect very, very, very low power. I'm talking about low power little devices that'll last 10 years on their 10-year battery life, that kind of thing, for the Internet of Things. What's the challenge for that? Is that if you're building an Internet of Things infrastructure and you're a carrier, you're doing that off your regular cells, so you have to create ubiquitous coverage in case the IoT thing might be in that coverage. But also, a lot of the IoT things require, now as it is, they have to be fixed because the infrastructure is fixed, and they have to be the end node has to be slightly higher power because they've got to reach all the way up to the to the E node Bs today. Instead, we built this little guy. So this actually has a SIM card in it. It's a CPE and an LTE base station. So this can, say, even ride on a train or a truck, connect and roam across a cellular network because it's a UE just like your phone. You drop the SIM card in it. And it can kind of carry along with it up to 10,000 you can connect up to 10,000 narrowband LTE low power Internet of Things connections using rebroadcasting in 900 megahertz narrowband LTE. So think of your utilities now and all the stuff they're trying to upgrade in LTE. A little box like this, or oil field with temporary stations and maybe their platforms move around or anything like that. There's no way any of those guys can do IoT that's really moving around. This little box allows them to do this. Intel paid us, the camera's on, crap. We were paid a lot of NRE from a certain company to build this because that certain company says that they're going to be building sub $1 IoT terminals within a year. But guess what? They have to connect to something. So they came to us to build a prototype base station. And this will be tested in a couple very interesting places in North America, coming up probably as soon as this year. One of them is very much of a household name sort of thing, because Intel wants us to create with them proof of concept networks using that box. Very unusual little box. This, it's not a speaker. This is just a residential small cell. Also has Wi-Fi. Nothing super fancy or special, I think, about this guy. It's just another tool in the tool cabinet. Haha, this is where it gets cool. So when I started learning about small cell, the first time was I went to a Dallas show a couple months ago. And this little box was in there. And Verizon and AT&T were camped in our booth for like 3 hours apiece. With like, one guy was the director of RAN strategy for AT&T and his little entourage of minions that followed him around. And they came in there and they talked about this guy because apparently this is really unique. So what this guy does, I've decided to call this a dark wireless play because we all understand what dark fiber means. The idea under kind of dark wireless is that you put infrastructure out there, and then once you have a bunch of these out there, then you say, hey, I've got this, you want to ride on this infrastructure. This box in its commercial form will have up to 4 different slots. But AT&T, T-Mobile, CBRS, Wi-Fi, or CBRS, Wi-Fi, Verizon, any combination thereof. So will the carriers play? Who knows? But meanwhile, you can drop in CBRS modules and then a Wi-Fi module, build this around in building, doing Wi-Fi replacement, whatever, and then you get a certain amount of scale. Then it becomes maybe an easier argument to Mr. Carrier who says, I've got a couple thousand of these or whatever out in the enterprise. Infrastructure's already there. Single backhaul out, single Ethernet connection out, single power connection, up to 4 different distinct carriers, and the eNode B can, or excuse me, the EPC can even be embedded in here. Mr. Carrier, do you want to play then? We think this is going to be a really hot little product under CBRS. We know that for a fact because in Barcelona we had 2 very large household names that came in and said, we want to do some thinking about OEMing this, private labeling it for them, so they could start building out. One is a particular company that has access to over 125 million poles and in-building access all over the country and actually the world. But they don't own any spectrum. And they don't really want to be a network operator, at least not on the front end, on the back end. So they want to do kind of this dark wireless play where they deploy out all these out there and then they tell any operator or whatever, hey, we have this infrastructure, you can ride on it. Like that. So apparently this is the only thing like this in the world that'll support that many devices in a form factor that small, this neutral host model. The idea that it's neutral for one box, multiple different kinds of spectrum and carriers. You have anything you want to say on NeutroCell? Because I know you're a big fan of it too.
I'm a huge fan, but that's a good start.
Okay. All right. But under CBRS, I like this because let's say you buy one PAL and you want the opportunity, maybe someone else buys a PAL, maybe your city or whatever, instead of having to deploy a whole nother box, imagine being able to just show up at their doorstep, the city CTO or whatever, and say, listen, the infrastructure's already out there. I've got open slots for you. All you got to do is drop in the slots for your PAL licenses. They didn't have to build anything. And then maybe you get the operator's network, something like that. I've got a lot of interviews coming up recently, and I'll be talking a lot about this dark wireless sort of idea. This is another fun one. It's less fun in the US because the FAA and stuff, but it's this little box. In Barcelona, Intel had this box on several drones hovering around their booth for the week. This is a SkyCell. It's a lot like the Node B IoT cell. This is also its own backhaul. It's got the SIM slot, so it can backhaul to the cellular network. And then it's also its own eNode B. So this is a really interesting we have drone solutions that can be run up to 24 hours, tethered drone solutions. So for disasters, things like that, it's a really interesting idea. And we've got a couple companies that we sell these to, in particular in China. Police, public safety applications, they really like this kind of thing. They can go into some place in some emergency situation and, you know, have cameras on there and not have to worry about Wi-Fi and have dedicated kind of connection. And then it's just backhauled by the existing cellular network. They don't even know it. They don't even have to know you're doing it because it's just a UE, right? You just drop in a Verizon SIM or whatever. It's another interesting one. So, again, not a whole lot of content, just trying to get your mind expanded and start thinking about this. SmallCell covers a massive range of different kinds of potential that you might be able to leverage. And we will be very big players in this. And I also love this because my competitors aren't doing this kind of stuff.